Well, welcome back to ValleyHoopsInsider.com. We're going to be so excited today to be talking with our friend Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org. We're going to break down bracketology a little bit for you today as we start to think about the Missouri Valley Conference with about two-thirds of the conference season left, but about two-thirds of the season gone. Where are the Missouri Valley teams standing in terms of trying to make it into the NCAA tournament? Our friend and really bracket expert, Rocco Miller, joins us now of Bracketeer.org. And Rocco, I know you travel all over the joint. Where do you happen to be this afternoon?
I'm home today, so it feels good and great to be back on with you, Harry. I had the privilege of stopping through Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Virginia last week. I got to see three different leagues: the NEC, the Ivy, and the ACC with that Virginia Tech Commonwealth rivalry game. So that was a great trip. Made it back home Saturday for the big San Francisco St. Mary's game for first place in the WCC on Saturday night. And with just all sorts of bracketology stuff taking off this week, I decided I'm going to just take it easy this week and stay here and watch some games finally.
When I first started talking to you, you were pretty much a West Coast guy, but you're everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of value in getting to see as many teams as possible. And fortunately, some of my business dealings outside of basketball takes me to a lot of different parts of the U.S. And so why not try to double up and get some basketball games in while I'm out in these places. And, I'm definitely fortunate to be able to do it. And, I always have a goal each year to try to see 20 out of the 32 leagues. And, now I've been able to, with some of the preseason stuff, we have a lot more of these double headers, quadruple headers on one day. I did Brooklyn on a Sunday in December where I got to see 4 games in one day. I mean, as a person who's trying to see as many teams as you can, it doesn't get much better than that. So between that and some of the holiday tournaments, it's been great. And now really trying to fine tune, all this information into what it actually means for March.
Bracketeer.org is the website, and Rocco routinely updates his bracket and lets you know what he's thinking. And before we dive into some of the current things, Rocco, I want to, for the new people, maybe they haven't seen you on our site before or they're not aware of Bracketeer.org. Bracketologists, take me back. Bracketologists are not there saying, this is what I think should happen. This is what I'm hoping happens. You're predicting what the NCAA Selection Committee will do. Am I correct?
That's 100% accurate. And I'm glad you said that. I think that's some of the initial misnomers about this process is we have some sort of opinion about all these different teams. It couldn't be actually further than the truth. The only time I get to have an opinion is my preseason bracket. So I take a ton of pride in that. And I actually go and see teams practice in the off season, help out with scheduling, all sorts of things to get as many clues as I can to put my opinions out there before the season starts. But once we have actual data, it is accessible today to be able to see what is called the NCAA team sheet for all 362 Division I members. And within those team sheets is all the same information that the committee goes off of. So certain pieces of information like the AP poll, some human driven things that pique fan interest do not show up on the team sheet. So a lot of that stuff I tune out throughout the year. I hardly ever can tell you who's in the AP poll and who's not. I know it's important for things like recruiting and you get an AP writer assigned to your games. I think if you can crack the top 25, outside of that, it really means nothing for the NCAA tournament. So the NCAA tournament is based on a whole set of criteria. It's much, much deeper than your net ranking or just your strength of schedule or just your road wins. All those things are important, but there's literally about 18 categories that are important, and you can use all those categories to compare teams. And so once you go through that exhaustive process, which I do twice a week, at least this time of year, you start to get a little bit more clarity over who belongs above who. And that's how it works.
Wow. 18 categories. I just think the net is the holy grail. And so therefore, right. I know I'm a novice, but actually I'm not even a novice. I'm not trying. I talk to people like you. I read websites. Just maybe 2 days ago, Gary Parrish, I'm sure, and I listen to his podcast here and there, and he puts out his top 25 and one. And the other day I was dogging him a little bit. I said, "Hey, man, you're always talking about the net and Ken Palm and Bart Torvik, and we got a Missouri Valley team that's 26 in the net and 25 or something in the Bart Torvik, and you're not talking about them at all. Like, give me a break. Like, help me out. Be on my side a little bit." I was giving him a hard time. Um, so, when I look at those, you talked about the AP polls and all that. I think it's the coaches poll or the AP poll. Indiana State has one vote, so which means they're about like 60th or something, in that thing. They are 26 in the net, and my latest look at your website, you have them as a 10 seed, and I can never tell which bracket's what. It's probably the South, I think it is. Talk about the plight, first of all, of mid-major teams trying to crack the code and get into the NCAA tournament if they don't win their conference tournament.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult these days. It seems increasingly harder as time goes by. And the net era is still relatively new, started in 2019. So this will be our, I believe, fifth tournament. We didn't have a tournament in 2020, but this will be the fifth year where the net is kind of the primary sorting tool. I think is the best way to explain it, because your own net is really just representative of how good the tool thinks you are. However, it's not. It's more for your opponents to sort their data through. So effectively, if you go win a game at Indiana State, it's saying you're winning a game at the 26th hardest place to win based on how good this team has been. But it's not necessarily saying a lot about Indiana State due to the fact that their own data is based on what they do against their own opponents, right? So the interesting thing about Indiana State is their resume is also grading out at number 26. And I think that's in a mid-major sense, the question you just asked, Harry, I think that's actually one of the more important metrics if you want to look at just one, based on the fact that there's a huge difference between selecting a team to be in the at-large pool and how you actually seed them. Because a lot of times what we've noticed in the last few selection committees is they'll use a lot of those predictive metrics, whether it be the net or Ken Palm or Torvik's not in there, but they do have the BPI. I think that's a little unfortunate because the BPI does favor power conferences quite heavily. However, they have those three to kind of help with seeding, and they can look at them for selection as well. But I do think the two resume metrics, which are SOR, strength of resume, and KPI, are the two. That is actually a better indicator if the resume is strong enough to be in. And once you're clearly in like the top 35 or top 30, I think it's almost really impossible for a committee member to take them out. So I do believe with Indiana State being there on top of course, all the other great things they've done, they're 8-3 away from home in both road and neutral. 4 of those 8 are true road wins, including the one just recently at Murray State. And the win at Bradley is falling into quad 1, which definitely says a lot. And I think the Northern Iowa road win is a quad 2 today. So you've got another thing I like to look at. I try to say this publicly because I know committee members listen sometimes. So I hope the committee members look at this as well. I like to look at how many teams have actually gone into these buildings and won. And Indiana State's one of 2 teams to win at Bradley, and they're one of 2 teams to win at Northern Iowa. So if that stays true, it shows just how hard it is to go to those places and get the wins.
Wow.
So those are the things I tend to look at. But again, they have so much pressure on them because majority of their games from here on out, a loss really kind of blows things up. So you got to just keep winning.
Indiana State, as I mentioned, 26 in the net, Drake 42 in the net, and Bradley 63. And as you mentioned, the win over Bradley, improving with age. Bradley's, I think they're 12 or 13-1 when Connor Hickman plays. And so they went through a little skid when he was injured, and they just every day you're climbing the ladder a little bit. I want to back up and say this, that most bracketologists, as I survey the land, they obligatorily put in a Missouri Valley Conference team at some spot, and there isn't a second one. At your latest bracket that I saw anyway, you had Drake and Indiana State both in the 64 in the field of 64, which is greatly encouraging to me, by the way, as a 100% Missouri Valley apologist. So, and I know you're not doing it for us. You're just breaking the numbers down like you see. What's helping Drake in their resume?
Yeah, so I do a process slightly differently than some of the others out there, but I think my process is the best reflection of what's going to happen in March. I always take the team that has the inside track on the number 1 seed for their conference tournament as the automatic qualifier. Today, that is Drake. They are tied at the top, but Drake has the head-to-head win. So that's clearly Drake from where I'm sitting. Now, if we're talking about Drake as an at-large candidate, they are close. I believe last Friday, they were probably would have been about 3rd or 4th out. And today they're probably 5th or 6th. Nothing that they did wrong. There was just a couple of these power conference bubble teams that had big wins and leapfrogged them, but they're right there. And one of the things I like about Drake's profile is they're 4-0 in their 4 toughest games. They've got the quad 1 win. They've got the overall 4-0 record against the top 2 quads. They actually have 2 quad 1 wins with both Nevada and Indiana State. And then they also have a nice record away from home at 6-3, combining both neutral and away games. However, they only have the 1 big road win at Southern Illinois. They'll probably want to add a 2nd and 3rd as they get through league play to build up in that large profile. And then I think the other thing that's really hurting them is all 3 of those losses are in the 3rd quadrant right now. So they're all considered quote unquote bad losses if you're talking bubble. I consider anything below quad 2B and below a bad loss when you're at that bubble level. Again, you can only take 36 overall at-large teams. And so right now it's a strain of 3 bad losses to only really 2 high-profile wins with Nevada and Indiana State. So it's just not quite balancing for them to get in. However, there's nothing but time. And if you ask me, I think, you look at the numbers, Drake's probably the most balanced team in the league. They have the best defense in conference play, right behind Bradley for the best offense in conference play. And so I think things are trending really well for them.
Yeah, and that overtime loss to UAB when Tucker was playing but injured and their point guard was out, that was a terrible loss. I talked to Darren DeVries about it. Not that UAB is terrible, but they're, like you said, a quad 3 loss, and overtime when they were dinged up a little bit, I was like, that's a terrible miss right there. When you so I hear what you're saying. Drake has the inside track to win the conference, and that makes total sense. Indiana State, their resume, you mentioned some of the things involved there, and you talked about the 18 different measurements and all of that. When I look at numbers that are readily accessible to a nimwit like me, number 1 in the nation in effective field goal percentage, and I think they're number 1, 2, 3, something like that in field goal percentage and in 3-point percentage, and they're one of the top 20, 25 teams in the nation, maybe top 15 in terms of pace of play. They're a super entertaining team. When I say all that, high-powered offensively, are those things that committee members even look at like, wow, we'll get a good game out of that team? I mean, do they look at any of those kinds of things?
It sure doesn't hurt. And, I think those things don't show up on the team sheet. So just to give you the straightforward answer, but the other piece of it is each committee member is assigned X amount of games to be watching. And that process, I think, begins in January. So even the last few performances, somebody should be watching them. At least one of the 12 members of the committee. And I think, some of that stuff is compelling in an argument. If we get down to the nitty gritty of selection week, and the Missouri Valley is always fascinating when you have a multi-bid scenario out of the league. And you know how much, Harry, I love this league. It's one of my favorites by far. The fascinating thing is it all ends on that Sunday and you have a whole week to look at Missouri Valley. Yes. It's sweat for the teams. But the nice thing is for the committee is, by the time the majority of the rest of the conferences start, it's like that following Wednesday or Thursday. And by then, I think they've already got kind of their place for the Missouri Valley team. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't know in the moment. But the good news is they've got a full evaluation done. I think it's much worse if you're like an American conference team that goes all the way to that final Sunday and maybe you lose the championship. They might have already decided that you're out no matter if you go to 4 overtimes or not. I think that's a much worse way to live. But anyway, so I do think, just based on the tournament wrapping up a week early, The full evaluations will be done. And I think whoever's assigned the Valley this year on the committee, there's so much to love about watching Indiana State. It's a beautiful brand of basketball. But at the end of the day, like I said, with all these different categories you have to sort teams with, I think the committee does a fair and respectable job of at least sticking to the guidelines and the bylaws and the principles of all the rules to get to that right answer. So I doubt it's going to matter, but one can hope.
I'm always hoping. We'll get back to Rocco Miller in just a minute. Are you in the market for a new car? I was, and I ended up at Don Brown Chevrolet here in St. Louis. Don Brown is famous for saying, hey, we're on Kings Highway at the entrance to the hill down in South St. Louis. And I went to Don Brown Chevrolet, and salesman Ben Yates answered all of my questions. He went the extra mile. He helped me understand the process, what that was going to be like. He got me perfectly situated into my brand new Chevrolet Trailblazer. If you're like me, I hate trying to buy cars, the salesman, the back and forth, the manipulation, all those kinds of things that go on. It was nothing like that at Don Brown Chevrolet with Ben Yates, my salesman. He helped me understand everything, took all the manipulation out of it, and helped me find the car I wanted and honestly I needed. My wife has been bugging me about getting into a new car. If you're looking for a new car, go to Don Brown Chevrolet. That's in South St. Louis, but not just anybody at that great dealership. Ben Yates is the guy you want to talk to. Call 314-474-0270. Ask for my new friend, Ben Yates. There's a picture of Ben, me, and my brand new car on the front page of our website, valleyhoopsinsider.com. Low pressure, great service, helpful to a fault. Let Ben Yates at Don Brown Chevrolet know that you've heard about him from me, Harry Schrader, here at valleyhoopsinsider.com. Ben Yates will make it worth your while. All right, we're back with Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org. At the end of the year, you'll put together your final bracket, and so will all the other 7,000 bracketologists. And there's a big competition. There's a big website that or organization or something you guys all submit them to. And does somebody get a big belt like WWE? What happens if you actually win?
I don't know. They put your name. I know they put your name at the top. I haven't won it yet, so it is what it is. I think you have to get a little bit lucky and take some chances to win it. And for me, I'm truly just going off of an educated guess process. So I have a feeling, Harry, I could be doing this the rest of my life, which I probably will, and probably never win it just because my process is so fine-tuned. But I am proud to say, like, the last couple of years, I've been top 20, top 15. So you can really count on me for good results. And you can see now overall with all 10 years I've been documented, I am 17th overall out of whatever you said, 7,000 people. So, so we'll take that and we'll just keep improving and see how close we can get to the top.
I would say year in and year out, you're better than the people from the Four Letter Network and from the Eyeball Network. And I mean, you actually score out better than the people that are household names across the country. And so I've paid attention. I know who the people are. Tell me about a couple of different things you're working on where you're a guest or you're a part of you do some work with the Field of 68 with Hoops HD. Also, there's the mock selection draft thing you do at the end of the year. Tell folks about that and where they can bump into those things.
Yeah, appreciate it. So yeah, Field of 68, we have a show called Fielding the 68. It's for this season, it's going to be every Monday and Friday at 5:30 Eastern, so 4:30 Central in your part of the world. And I think that's a great show. We put a lot of work into it. We just had the debut episode yesterday on Monday the 22nd, so feel free to go back and watch that. It's on YouTube. It's all over their Twitter page over there. And the whole purpose of that is to take four of the top bracketologists, bring us all together. It's myself, Andy Bottoms, who's from Indiana, Inside the Hall, Assembly Call, really, really sharp guy. Lucas Harkins from Heat Check CBB. He's been at it for a long time. Also from Indiana. Something about Indiana and bracketology. And then the fourth person is Brad Wachtel, who's a Rutgers guy. Used to work, I think with NBA teams and things. He's very analytical. So we have 4 different perspectives, but we build a composite bracket every Monday and Friday. So that's pretty neat. Obviously gets a lot of eyeballs. So that's good for all of us. And then I think the Hoops HD I love a lot because those guys are just really, really diehard college hoops guys. And we'll do a bracket show every Thursday. I do my best to join. I actually haven't joined yet this year, but I'll be on this Thursday. And those are all on YouTube as well. So feel free to look those up or go back and watch. And then the other thing is like you said, the mock selection committee. This will be our 3rd year. It's ran by Tim Kruger from Stadium. He's out of Omaha. We have Dave Amon from Bracketville, who's actually won the bracket matrix before. So he's a former champion. We have folks from the USA Today, Bleacher Report, same person, Brad Wachtell from Rutgers that I mentioned earlier. He's part of it. And for the first time this year, we're really excited. They're going to fly us to Omaha, and we're going to be in a room as if we're the real committee, physically there for a whole weekend, March 1st through 3rd.
Wow.
So that'll actually be the weekend before Arch Madness. So we're really excited to do that. We have a couple sponsors. I think I don't know if we're going to live stream it or just do video recaps or how that's going to work, but stay tuned for that as well.
Wow, spectacular. And then the smoke comes out of the chimney and you then tell everybody who's going to be landing where.
That's right. Yeah, actually on the last day on March 3rd, that Sunday night, we'll do our own selection show, just to give everybody a little feel for it 2 weeks ahead of time.
And obviously, that's going to change with the conference tournaments, but it gives people a great feel for how it will all play out. It's just spectacular stuff. I love looking at stuff that guys like you and you in particular put out because it gives me a frame of reference because I don't have the time to go dig in all these things. So I need somebody to hold my hand and at least show it to me. You talked about the rest of the schedule for Indiana State and Drake and maybe even Bradley. If I understand this correctly, Bradley's got 2 Q1s and a Q2 left, and Drake has probably the same two Q1s and a Q2, and Indiana State's got a couple of really good ones as well. Late in the season, within your own conference, if they are land in the Q quadrant 1 or quadrant 2, that still helps you. The committee doesn't back up and go, "Wow, that's in their conference," or do they? That's the question.
Everything counts the same, whether it's in conference or non-conference. So it's basically, I think the best way to look at it is if you have a 31 game schedule, which most college basketball teams do. Every time you take the court, it's one piece of that 31 piece pie, right? So whatever you're doing that night is part of your story. Even if you're playing a bad team, if you go out and you don't play well, it's going to impact some of your numbers. Of course, if you get the win, that's most important in terms of resume. But outside of that, every time you take the court, it's just as important as any other time. So at the end of the day, when the committee starts reviewing all the data, obviously we start reviewing it all before the season's over, but for the most part, you're looking at that overall picture. So that's why when we get to championship week and a team all of a sudden wins a big game on the Thursday or all of a sudden gets upset on the Thursday, most of the time it's an overreaction, whether how important that win was or how drastic the loss was, because 31 pieces of evidence have already been submitted. So it's really just a 30-second piece of evidence at that first round level when you get to conference tournaments. So I think that's really important for people to keep in mind, not to really overreact or underreact to certain results. However, if you are in the Valley or any league that's not a power conference league, you do have the pressure to continue winning, especially games outside of the top 2 quadrants. And then you do have a couple more opportunities if you have those quad ones left that can even beef up and take the decision out of the committee's hands. So that does exist. It's just, but fundamentally all games mean the same.
So I'm playing you in a game on a Thursday night in February when nobody's paying attention because it's cold, and I beat you by 3 or I beat you by 30. Does the margin of victory matter?
It matters for some of these numbers because you notice how the net will impact quite a bit with that. And you'll also notice things like KenPom and BPI, of course, impacted by that. Now, strength of resume, KPI is not supposed to make a difference. That's just all about who you beat, where you played, and how you did, which I think is great for figuring out which teams belong. Because the hardest part of the sport is just getting the win. Kind of the finagling part of the sport is, should I leave my starters in so we win by 40 every game? Indiana State's done a good job as an example of mastering that. And I think it does make a difference because in the net example, even though, like I said earlier, it's all about your opponents. If you are in Indiana State and you're performing like a top 20 net team and the net is the NCAA's preferred tool, it's not going to look very good if they leave a top 20 team out of their own tournament, right? So there is like a human psychology element to that. But we have seen teams closer to 30 get left out. So again, we're trying to figure out where that line lies. And, every year we learn a little bit more, but yeah, outside of that, I think it's more just about seeding for that. So like if Indiana State is clearly in at a certain point that is keep winning like crazy, their seed could go up to like a 7, a 6, a 5. We saw Buffalo the one year when they had Nate Oates with that super team get all the way up to a 5 seed. We saw Wofford get a 7 seed. We saw Murray State get a 7 seed. So it is possible to just keep climbing the ladder with an abundance of dominance.
The star power. Do they care about star power? See, I'm trying to say yes, this myth is true, or this myth isn't. So Tucker DeVries is this spectacular player destined for the NBA, playing for Drake. A spectacular player like that, does that help a team get in?
It's not supposed to. Anything else besides that would just be speculation. So I shouldn't speculate. I should trust this process because I'm very accurate at guessing it. So I've never taken it into account in my projections, and those have worked out pretty well. So I shouldn't start now. However, if it makes sense where, let's say Drake loses in the Missouri Valley tournament, that'd be great to put him on TV in Dayton in the first 4, get a big name on your commercials ahead of true TV action on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. But those kind of sidebars, college basketball is full of great stories and great fan bases. I think, I think March Madness will be well watched no matter which teams they pick.
And then there's the I think in your bracket, as a matter of fact, you have Drake playing Iowa State. And,
yes.
and we always believe, no matter what you tell me, I'm going to believe that they put teams against one another for TV value, but you're probably going to tell me they don't. But even in your own bracket, you've got Drake and Iowa State today.
Right. And that will happen sometimes with just the process. And again, I'm a super 100% process person. And it's always fun to me when it shakes out that way. And when a committee member gets interviewed, they'll always say that too, even if they, did a little extra string pulling. Now, when you get to the 12, so Drake being a 12 seed in this projection, they were behind McNeese. So for me, it really played out to where McNeese is closest to Dallas. So it's easy to put them in the Dallas region in case they make a run. So that aligned them with Alabama in the Dallas region. And then for Drake, it ended up being where Detroit was their preferred, but Detroit was already taken by Oregon, and Oregon was ahead of both of them. And so the next closest was Boston. And Iowa State happened to already be in that spot. So sometimes it just works out that way. And then there's nothing preventing Iowa State and Drake being matched up because they didn't play in the regular season, unfortunately. But that would be an awesome first-round game if we could get that.
It would be an awesome first-round game. And then when I back up and I hear Boston, so like we're going to take these 2 Iowa teams and ship them to Boston. Well, nobody's thinking logistics, but like it's just the way it's playing out. I totally get it.
Yeah, so Boston's actually where the regional is. So they would play the way I have it is they would play in one of the last sub-regional locations. They would actually be playing each other in Spokane, Washington.
Well, great, so much closer.
But yeah, sometimes this is how it shakes out. Like Spokane this year, of course they want to host as much as they can because of Gonzaga. Gonzaga's having a terrible year. So the way it's playing out in this part, and I think this is interesting, is Spokane's going to get pushed to the very end of the location assignments, which means they're probably going to get both pods be a 4-13 and a 5-12, which is exactly what you'll see on my website right now. And the cool thing for local fans is 4-13s and 5-12s are some of the best first round and second round games. So you in this scenario, and it looks for all intents and purposes, nobody wants to go to Spokane, so they'll be safe for the end. And a Missouri Valley team could very much land in Spokane.
So Missouri Valley fans, I want you to know, Rocco is telling us today, things can change. But today he has Drake and Indiana State in the bracket. Is there a snowball's chance of Bradley working their way in there? They are 63 in the net, 75 in Ken Palm. They have, as I mentioned before, maybe 2 quad ones and 1 quad 2 left. I mean, obviously they could win the tournament. I'm saying besides winning the tournament, they have no chance. Am I right?
I think they need to win the tournament. They have that awesome win over Utah State, which matters a bit, quite a bit. Road win at Southern Illinois. Those are their 2 big wins. But the losses, they have the quad 4 loss, unfortunately, to Cleveland State.
Mm-hmm.
If somehow Cleveland State jumps up 40 spots, that will move to quad 3. But again, it's a total of 3 bad losses right now. Unfortunately, Duquesne by 1 spot is in quad 3. If they go up 1 place, that's quad 2. So I don't want to say it's impossible for Bradley. Their resume ranking right now is 83rd, which is pretty far out of bounds. Like Drake is 54 right now, so they're much closer. And like I said earlier, the Sycamores are 26 in that. So Bradley's going to have to just steamroll the rest of their schedule to even be in the conversation. But I do think here's how I think it could happen with 3 bids. You need Bradley or anybody else to win Arch Madness. And then if Drake and Indiana State just finish as strong as possible, besides that one more day they play each other, I think they're both very capable of getting at-large profiles.
Rocco says there's a chance. Missouri Valley fans, take heart. We still have a chance. Be awesome to have 3 teams back in there again. But before we let you go, and I appreciate you've been very gracious to give us tons of time here today. When I think about how this process all goes down, and we hear, Fred Smith, who's the commissioner of XYZ conference, is now on the selection committee. It's not that guy's job to sell his league. And as a matter of fact, if I remember what you've told me in the past, they almost like excuse themselves when they're talking about their league. But is there a subtle influence that commissioner has, fill in the blank commissioner, to help his own league?
Yeah, I have to take this as an opinion question, because without being there with them every step of the way, I can't give you a factual answer.
Right.
But a lot of what I do here with this process is art and science, and part of that is psychology as well. Just doing the psychology of, these guys will spend 5-6 days together, at least, maybe 7. And you're going to lunch together, you're going to dinner together, or they're bringing you food. You know how it is. If you put me, you, and 10 other random college basketball junkies in a room and we were trying to figure this out, I think over time, over a week together, we'd all become pretty close friends. And so you wouldn't want to disappoint your neighbor unless you absolutely had to, right? So that's some of the stuff that I think is fascinating. You obviously can never prove anything like that, but I think it certainly doesn't hurt. Let's just put it that way, to have somebody from your league or from your exact school. And the rule is, just to be clear, if you're Bubba Cunningham was on the committee for years from North Carolina. Every time North Carolina was discussed, he had to leave. But I don't think if you're a commissioner, you have to leave if a team in your league's discussed. So I think that's the difference.
Gotcha. Well, listen, we appreciate your time today, and we try to pay attention to your website and get educated as often as we possibly can. I know you're said you're taking this week to recover and crunch some numbers. Where will you be next, though, in terms of seeing games or seeing conference play?
Yeah, great question. I'm looking at trying to get to the Valley as soon as I can, and who knows, maybe this will be the year I can get to Arch Madness. That's on my radar. Next week I will be somewhere. I haven't made a final decision. I do know the week after I will be in Utah for a few days. So I'm going to be at Nevada, Utah State, which will be a big bubble game on a Tuesday. It's that first Tuesday in February. And then Arizona's playing Utah, I believe, Thursday. And there's a small chance of maybe seeing Weber State on that trip. So those two are coming soon. And stay tuned on the rest. I try to stay nimble on those decisions.
Check out Rocco at Field of 68, Hoops HD, the mock selection show later in the year, and, of course, his website, Bracketeer.org. Appreciate your time today. Always fun to catch up with you and to get a little bit smarter. I'm always working on getting smarter, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Harry. I appreciate it. It's always fun to be on with you.
That's Rocco Miller, Bracketeer.org. Check out his site and those other places, Field of 68 and the other places he's at. It's just spectacular stuff. That'll do it for us. Remember, since you've been here, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.